Welcome to this edition of Backstage Pass with Lia Chang. I'm your host, Lia Chang. Today, I'm catching up with my dear friend, Joel de la Fuente, who's got so many film, TV, and theater projects that we just have to dig into. Joel.
So great to be here.
Welcome to the show.
So much.
I'm so glad that we got to initially catch up with Jeanne Sakata
Yes.
at the McCarter. Here there are blueberries. And but now I got you in my little hot seat.
So nice to be on the same side of the camera
Yay.
as you for once. You
I
know?
don't think we've ever.
It's nice.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's really, really nice. I think it should be more often. So I'd like to talk to you about how you got involved with Keiko Green's play.
The play is called You Are Cordially Invited to the End of the World. It's by Keiko Green at South Coast Repertory in Costa Mesa, California, which services Los Angeles as well as Orange County. It's a play about a lot of things, but it is a comedy about a man who finds out he's terminally ill and believes that he is also the earth, which is also dying. So he begins this quest to save the planet and then hopefully thereby saving himself, as well as trying to revisit the loving relationships in his life, which he has, for varying reasons, been not as successful as he would like to be maintaining them. I basically got involved because I helped develop the play at the O'Neill this summer, and I was so surprised when I was asked if I could come, because I looked at the play and I saw Keiko's name on it, and I first met Keiko about almost 20 years ago, like 18 years ago. She'd just gotten out of college, and she was an assistant director on this production of Ivanov we were doing here in the city.
Which I saw.
Which you saw, which was originally at the National Asian American Theater Company, and then co-produced and remounted at the Mint Theater. And so we were doing it there. And Keiko, that's where I got to know the amazing Keiko, who at the time was newly graduated and aspiring to be an actor, I think, at the time. Just really impressed with her, just her spirit, her curiosity, her talent. And so here, you know, all these years later, I'm being invited to do a play of hers, and I was just so excited and bowled over by her ability and her use of language, and I'm just really excited to do it because I think, as we were saying, it's the first time I've done a play with other people in it in more than 10 years. I mean, maybe even 15 years.
I knew you before Hold These Truths, Jeanne Sakata's Hold These Truths, and you're playing Gordon Hirabayashi and 30 other characters for which you were Drama Desk nominated. But I was so fortunate that I got to document basically your trajectory through the show.
The other day, how grateful I am to Jeanne. You know, basically Jeanne fell in love with this story and was shocked that she had never heard Gordon's story before. So shocked that she became a playwright in order to tell the story, because no one had told it before. You know, Jeanne was an accomplished actor for many years, and was so inspired by Gordon's story that she wrote the play herself. And she had the amazing opportunity, as you did, to meet Gordon and to meet all of the people in that world.
All of the people
Lots of people in that world. And I was a sort of a, I mean, at the time, a latecomer to this process. You know, she had developed it. The show had already had a full run in Los Angeles, and so she had met some folks in New York that were interested in her as an artist, then interested in the play, and so she found a home at the Lark, which is very missed today, like a place that really supported and helped develop playwrights and their work. And then Tom Sesma, the amazing Tom Sesma, worked with Jeanne on that for a while. And then for whatever reason, Tom couldn't be involved after that. And
The Lion King in Las Vegas.
There you go.
Scar.
And the fantastic Tom Sesma. And so Jeanne was teamed up with the director Lisa Rothy, who I went to acting school with, and so Lisa brought me on. That's how I met Jeanne. That's how I was introduced to the play. And like Jeanne, I was so shocked that I had never heard the story either, and was thrilled to help tell it, but also so excited to be challenged with a role that for so long, you know, Asian American actors are not often given the opportunity to show depth, versatility, complexity, and here it all was in one amazing theatrical piece. And so it was such a huge gift to have the opportunity to get to do that, to bring the play to New York City. And then from that, of course, well, I think it sort of started because one of my dear friends, Daniel Day Kim, came to see the play in New York, loved it, and wanted to produce it. He was just starting with producing, and so he produced the play back where he lives in Hawaii, and that began the process of Hold These Truths starting to tour around. So since then, I think we've taken it to like 13 places. I think I like to refer to it as the gift that keeps on giving. You know, I mean, there's always been resonance. This is a show. This is a story that happened, you know, 80 years ago now, but it's a show that continues to, unfortunately, have a lot of resonance to what's going on today. You know, when we first did it, while we were rehearsing it in New York in 2012, there was a bombing of a Sikh place of worship, I believe, at the time, and I remember us just thinking, wow, we really need to hear the story again. And every year, you know, we seem to be desperately more in need of hearing the story again and again so we don't repeat history. And also to sort of see what it's like for how one person can make a difference. How you can take a principled stand. You can feel like everything is against you, and you can still sort of stand your ground and have your principles mean something. Well, my first opportunity as a series regular on a television show was in the 1990s. I was like a year out of acting school on a show called Space Above and Beyond for a pretty new network, Fox Television. It was a completely overwhelming experience, you know, sort of tossed into the middle of everything. But it was a great experience, and it was getting a chance to work with a lot of people who had never been in that situation before either. So we sort of learned together, made mistakes together. We're like a family together. And to this day, I'm continually surprised by how many people have seen that show and were affected by that show. I was just, a couple of years ago, I was working on the spinoff of The Walking Dead, and we're in France shooting at Mont Saint-Michel, which is, it's not Paris. It's sort of, you know, it's sort of in the countryside. And a guy sitting me down, he's like, oh my gosh, I'm such a big fan. And I said, oh, have you seen all the other people from Walking Dead here? And he said, no, not that. Space 2063, which is what it was called in Europe. And, you know, here we are 25 years later, 30 years later, and here's this man in a restaurant in the countryside of France. Like, that's really one of the biggest gifts I think that television can give you, that one, that your work sort of lives forever, for better or for worse, but then also the number of people that it can affect. You just don't know. And
where did you shoot it?
We shot the pilot in Australia.
Wow.
On the East Coast, in a place called Surfers Paradise. In a new studio at the time, Village Roadshow Studios, which now I think they were talking about all the new renovations it was undergoing. So, you know, we were one of the first people to shoot out there.
So from there, because I know that you have many episodes of Law & Order SVU under your belt.
Yep. My friend Mike Doyle and I, Mike Doyle is a wonderful actor and director, and he and I played sort of similar dramaturgical necessities on that show. He was the medical lab guy, and I was the tech guy. So if it was like bodily fluids, it was Mike, and if it was like porn, it was me. And so we sort of occupied similar. We had similar challenges on that show for 50 plus episodes. I think maybe to this day we're the most recurring characters on the history of that show.
Wow.
That might not be true anymore, but it was true for a really long time. Johann Price, that's one of my favorites. I mean,
so let's talk about how you first got the role.
I had just sort of discovered I was no longer on SVU, and so I was I was an actor like in my 40s, an Asian American man at a time where, we just couldn't, there wasn't a lot of work. And so I basically thought my career was over. Nobody really was interested in hiring me. And then for various personal reasons, I got obsessed with trying to do a Morgan Freeman impersonation, put it on Facebook. My friend Dan, as we talked about earlier, sort of gave me some constructive criticism on my Morgan Freeman impersonation. And as brothers and good friends do, I got competitive and really doubled down and learned a monologue from Shawshank Redemption and put it on Facebook. And that post, which was sort of done for friends with no other feeling behind it other than just trying to be creative and fun among friends, winded up in the hands of a former vice president of NBC Casting, now the head of Gaumont International, the biggest media company in Europe, who were casting their first show on streaming media, which was Netflix's second original show, Hemlock Grove. They couldn't cast this part of this sort of darkly ambiguous mad scientist type. And so she sort of thought, well, I think that guy doing that weird Morgan Freeman impersonation, he could be interesting. And so that's how I got an audition for that show. And then the show's creators, Brian McGreevy and Lee Shipman, and the showrunner Mark Verheiden, all of them saw my audition tape, but also the Morgan Freeman impersonation. And later they said that was the thing that sort of got you this part. And it was such a confusing moment because nobody really knew what streaming was at that time. Nobody really knew what it was going to be, and that just ended up beginning a whole other chapter for my career because one, it was playing something that was totally against type for me up until that point, playing someone with a dark side, someone that wasn't so close to how I present in my everyday life as a person. And it was the first time really where I was being encouraged to use the skills that I loved to develop and why I loved acting in the first place, which was to be a character actor. And so to finally start getting paid and employed for the part of acting that I felt I understood and had the most passion for doing, that couldn't have been a more fortunate job for me. It was great for my confidence. It helped me realign how I felt about myself and how I could be of service to stories, and sort of just reawakened the passion and the creativity I felt for acting, and also showing me that I could do that in front of a camera. Because up until that point, there had been a stretch of, a long time where I felt like all the jobs that I was getting in front of the camera it didn't quite feel like acting somehow. Like I was somehow having a hard time bringing my artistic process to a professional job.
Well, especially when you're theater trained.
Yeah.
You're not just coasting on your good looks.
Well, never really had that problem. So for theater, it was always, that's how I came into it, and that was my I was used to working in a particular way, and that's always how we worked, when we were working in the theater. It's just, unfortunately, more times than not, you could be working and you weren't making any money at all, certainly not enough to pay your rent or anything like that most of the time.
Or to support a family.
To support a family, which I had. So, it was that sort of adjustment, the transition of being someone who loves acting and feels in their soul that they're an actor, how you take that passion and then wed it with what it's like to be a professional actor. That's sometimes, more often than not, from what I've seen, that's a bumpy transition. And a lot of the time, it's a transition that people are unable to make all the way through because it's really hard to find a way to bring your creative process to bear in a professional world sometimes. So this was sort of the first time this had ever happened, because usually you have to run a gauntlet of audition after audition. You have to audition for so many different people, then you have to audition for producers and network and all this stuff. I had just gotten cast off these tapes, and I sort of thought, and off this Morgan Freeman tape. So I thought, when they meet me in real life and they see how I interact in real life, they're going to think they've made a terrible mistake and I'm going to get fired. I was nervous, and here I am in Toronto, and then I'm having dinner the night before, and I'm leaving to go back to my room, and someone calls my name, and I look over, and I recognize who it is just because his picture is on the back of the book, Hemlock Grove. It's Brian McGreevy, who is the author of the book and the executive producer and co-creator of the series. And he's calling my name, and he's like, hey, come say hi to everybody. And there's a huge table of the Netflix people and all the producers and stuff. And in that moment, when I see the way that he's sort of so wonderfully open and welcoming to me, such a great lesson for me. I learned in that moment, you're not going to get fired at all. In fact, you are the answer to the questions that they have about this character. So I was so used to ceding my authority and control to the people that were my employers, showing up to SVU where you basically just do what you're told. If you do something, you're not supposed to do anything on your own. You're not supposed to do anything too much. You're just supposed to serve the exposition, basically, which is its own kind of role and really should be its own class taught in acting class, like how to do procedurals, how to play supporting parts in television shows, because they're very difficult to do. But here I was suddenly being shown that, I'm the expert on this character. I'm the one that answered the questions that made them hire me, and that's how I have to approach this job. So from that point on, from the moment that Brian welcomed me to the group and I got to meet people, my attitude changed. And as scary as it was sometimes, I just realized you have to go into it with that kind of ownership, that kind of authority, and then it sort of moves you into a place, which is terrifying sometimes, but where the buck does stop with you, where you do take more responsibility and authority for that, and you begin to really enter that part of your process, which is owning the fact that you are a primary storytelling component in front of a camera.
Which I feel is what you were in Man in the High Castle.
That will always be one of my favorite jobs.
So first, let's tell the audience, I don't know why you hadn't been watching Man in the High Castle. If you haven't, you should start watching it, especially for this gentleman right here. But let's tell the audience who you played in Man in the High Castle.
I play Chief Inspector Takeshi Kido, who is the head of the Kempeitai, the Japanese secret police in San Francisco, in a alternate reality version of the United States in 1962, where the Axis powers won the war, and the United States is split between the greater Nazi Reich on the East Coast and the Pacific states of Japan on the West Coast.
So what was it like for you to have played Gordon Hirabayashi and everything that happened in terms of the Japanese, but to be a completely different universe?
Sort of the antithesis. I mean,
you were so compelling to watch.
Thanks. Well, that's one of the great blessings of that period of time. I mean, the whole reason why I got to audition for The Man in the High Castle was because I was doing Hold These Truths. The people from Man in the High Castle were only interested in seeing people who were Japanese, and my representatives, my managers, who I had just signed with. This was the first thing they sent me out on.
What year was this?
This was in 2014, maybe.
Okay.
14 or 15. They said, well, our client has just been nominated
Japanese.
for an award for Japanese American. He speaks some Japanese in the play, and they said, okay, we'll just send the tape. We'll see. So that gave me the opportunity to be looked at, to be seen. But then when I looked at the material, they actually gave me the material for two characters. One was Tagomi, who's like Tagomi on the show, who's like the character who appears in the book. Kido doesn't appear in the book. And he had much more to do, really great role. But it was Kido that I really gravitated towards. I felt like I had a real understanding of who he was and an appetite to play him. And so that's the one that I chose to audition for. And I was the first person to be cast in that show. Man in the High Castle happened to occupy a time and place where it was held up as something that streaming could give us, that networks weren't giving us.
Well, and I also think it not only could streaming give us, but also I really consider it prestige TV, The Man in the High Castle.
It's The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon.
Okay.
But then it became The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, The Book of Carol. And then now I'm not sure in season 3 what it's going to be. But
But you're on the first season.
I come in at the end of the first season, and then I'm in all of season 2.
Okay.
I play a character named Lo Sang, and he is he's from New Jersey. He's someone who went to France to study as a Buddhist. He went to study in France, and then the apocalypse happened, and the walkers came and everything. And now he's the head of a group that tries to aspire to the higher goals of humanity still. So there's all members of all religions who have survived, and now they're sort of hidden away, trying to aspire still to be the best of humankind, while everyone else is trying to survive and sort of is a slave to their baser instincts, I guess. Mm-hmm. We shot in France. I was in Paris from February to December, which was much longer than intended because we had the strike, obviously, in between there. So I was going back and forth. I had the opportunity to work with several old friends. One, David Zabel, who's the showrunner of the Daryl Dixon spin-offs. He and I were in acting school together. Mm-hmm. He was a third year at grad acting at NYU when I was a first year. We got to be friends then, and then we both were living in LA when I was doing Space, and he was still aspiring to be an actor. And then when he started to write, I read his first script, and we talked about it in Norms, over breakfast, and then he became sort of like a little wunderkind. Like he was the youngest. He became the showrunner of ER, which was the #1 show in the country, I think, at the time. And he's just a wonderful writer and an amazing showrunner. Very organized. He can really run a show. And so he is the reason why I'm on The Walking Dead. And then Dan Percival, who was an executive producer and supervising director on The Man in the High Castle, occupied a similar role on Daryl Dixon. So I got to be directed by Dan again, having a continuation of all the same sort of artistic conversations and aspirations. We got to continue our work together on a different show. So that was, this theme that we talked about with Gordon and Hold These Truths, getting to do a play, leave, come back, leave, come back. It's such an unusual experience for an actor, but it's a wonderful one to see how the work grows. And then when you work with colleagues again and again, to work with Dan Percival, over the course of 4 seasons of Man in the High Castle, where you're leaving and coming back, but then changing everything around and coming on a different show and getting to work on multiple episodes again, that's just such a great treat, because when you share, when you begin to share a common language and an aesthetic, and you know how each other works, you have the opportunity to sort of to have access to sort of a deeper level of work.
Okay, you have a new movie coming out, Ramona at Midlife.
Yes.
And you play Carlos.
Yes.
Can you tell me about the film and where people can see it?
The film Ramona at Midlife is by the wonderful Brooke Berman, who is a longtime, amazing playwright who has written and directed her first feature film and done an amazing job and surrounded herself. It's about women of a certain age who are sort of being judged on their lives by people who aren't them. It's a woman who had some success as an artist in her younger life and who's been raising a family and living her life, and people sort of refer to her as someone who has disappeared, and a cautionary tale for artists. And it's the story of how she gets her story back about, what constitutes an artist's life first of all, mm-hmm. And the different ways in which you can be the author of your own life. I play Carlos. Carlos is her husband. They've been separated, and it's sort of how they negotiate how you live this complicated life as artists in this world.
And how did you become part of that project? Did you know Brooke, or did you audition? Okay,
I didn't know Brooke. We run in the same, we run in similar circles. She, it was an amazing opportunity. She just came and said, "Would you want to work on this?" And then we met and discovered we're both from the same part. We grew up in the same part of Chicago. We know a lot of the same people. We know a lot of the same places for sure. Then she was in Providence, Rhode Island at the same time I was in college in Providence, Rhode Island.
Oh my.
We know exactly the same people, and I did not know this. And then of course I went to acting school in New York, and she came to New York and was producing plays and stuff and writing them. Okay.
What does it mean for you to be an Asian American theater maker in this time?
It's a really exciting time. It's such an interesting time. Because if I was, say, 15 years younger, 20 years younger, when I look at the younger people that are here now, I'm sort of bowled over by the amount of opportunity that they potentially have. I mean, it's still a very difficult business,
Well,
obviously.
Keiko Green, it's a perfect example.
Yes.
She has 3 plays in these next, like, I think she has 2 that are out right now. One's at the Old Globe.
Yes.
One's in San Francisco.
That's right.
And then yours in LA.
Yeah. And ours, by the way, is a Susan Blackburn finalist.
Okay.
So if you're younger, you see all of this opportunity, and what comes with that also is a sense of belonging, a sense of privilege, that you were a part of this, an expectation, an entitlement to try to go be a part of it, It's still really hard. There's no guarantees, obviously. But I'm sort of like wide-eyed at that, and I love that. I love that you can look like we do and feel that you are just as entitled to get up in front of everybody and share your experience and be heard. That's something that I think for me, when I started doing it, the fact that there wasn't any of those things was a huge reason why I wanted to do it in the first place. It's an exciting time to be storytellers.
And do you find that to be true on television?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that when you have 500 television shows going in English at any one time, even if 300 of them are bad, or even if if the expectation before was 20 million people need to watch a television show for it to be a hit, now it's like 20,000 people can watch it, and depending on what your expectation is, that's all that they're looking for. It's like it's gone from being like a movie theater with 3 movies that are showing to a bookstore with 1,000 books on the shelves, and you can just walk in. Some books are made for everybody, but if you walk into a bookstore with your open heart, you're gonna find something for you somewhere, and I think that's where we are now in television, and I think it's beautiful.
Great. Thank you for joining me for this edition of Backstage Pass with Lia Chang. Until next time.